Welcome back to another JS Drop from This Dot. In this episode, Debbie O'Brien will give us an introduction to Playwright, a cross-platform, cross-language testing framework for web and mobile development. You'll get an application up and running with end-to-end testing and see just how quickly you can get started with Playwright. Let's get started.
So welcome everyone. We are here to show the world how cool Playwright is, learn as much as possible. And yeah, basically, if you're out there and you're thinking, what is Playwright? Then, oh my God, where have you been? Seriously? So Playwright is a fantastic framework for testing your applications for end-to-end testing. And Playwright is about 3 years old, actually 3 years and I think a week, more or less. So basically, if you haven't been using Playwright, you totally should. I'm going to show you today a little bit about Playwright. We're going to get an application up and running and testing. We might do a little bit of authentication as well and show you how that works. And basically, the idea is to just show you how easy Playwright is to get started with testing, show you all the cool features and tooling. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you want to code along, you can totally do that. So are you ready? We are ready to get started. So here is my my basically empty project that I created called JS Drop. There's nothing in here at all. So I've got VS Code open. And we're going to start by installing Playwright. So a couple of ways to install Playwright, and you'll find them in the docs, right? If you click on the docs, you can literally get started from the installation or from VS Code. I'm going to use VS Code because I'm a big VS Code fan. If you're not using VS Code, you totally should use VS Code. No, honestly, you can use the CLI if you want to. That's totally cool as well. So here, I'm basically going to open my command panel, and I'm going to install Playwright. So if I just type in Playwright, it'll show me the install Playwright command, and that's what I'm going to do. And what this gives me is a menu, and it's going to say, do you want me to install the browsers Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit? And that's by default. I could just say, you know, I only want Chromium or only Firefox or only WebKit, but I'm going to install them all. It's totally fine to install them all. And then you can choose which ones you want to run your tests on later and configure that. So no worries. If you're afraid of TypeScript, you can totally check the use JavaScript, but I totally say use TypeScript. You do not have to have TypeScript knowledge to use TypeScript, but you're going to get the types already done for you, and it's going to help you. So it's a lot easier to just keep using TypeScript, totally write in JS if you want. And then this is really cool, GitHub Actions workflow. It's literally going to add the GitHub Actions workflow for you. And that means you don't have to do anything to have your tests running on CI if you're using GitHub. So that's kind of cool, just out of the box. Has it all sorted for you. So I'm going to click OK, and you can see down here in my terminal, it's doing all its stuff there at installing everything. And that was quick, right? And we're done. And you can see this is what we have here. So if you're following along, you should have got to this stage as well. So I'm going to walk through what we have just given you here, right? You can see here that it's giving you a couple of commands that you can follow. But let's have a look at what we have. So I mentioned about the workflow, right? This is our YAML file, and this is basically going to do all that GitHub action stuff so that it installs the Playwright browsers on CI and then runs the Playwright tests on CI. You don't have to do anything to change this, just works. Just know it's there. And if you did want to do any kind of other funky stuff, then that's where you would modify this. Test folder is obviously where your tests go, and we'll go through the example test in a second. I'm going to presume that nobody has experience of Playwright. So if you are like a big Playwright user and you find this too easy, don't worry. We're going to get into the hardcore stuff later. We also have a test example folder, and this is got a demo to do app. So I highly encourage people to check this app out as well, because it's really cool and a lot of tests in there. And then obviously we've got git ignore, just your git ignore stuff that's going to ignore the Playwright report, the test results, the node modules, and the cache. And then let's go to the package JSON, which is just like, I'm just installing Playwright. There's nothing else in this repo. And then my config file, really important. Again, most of the stuff is already configured for you, and you don't really need to do anything to change this. But sometimes you might want to come in and change stuff, and we will change some stuff in here later. But I'll just walk you through some of the default things like the test directory, right? This is called tests. You might have E2E folder if you installed and chose, if you had another folder there or something. Timeout, that's just the timeout that is set by default. The expect timeout for the expect library. Tests are running in fully parallel. So this is really cool, and leave that on unless you want it to not run in fully parallel. Forbid only, this is just basically if you wrote test.only because you only wanted to run a specific test, and then imagine you put that into CI, that would be terrible. Be like, oh my God, it's like console log forbid on CI kind of thing. Retries, so you've got your tests running retries on CI, so it's going to retry that test. If it fails once, it will retry it again and again. And workers, we're going to use one in CI. And then reporter, we're going to use the HTML reporter. Again, I'll show you the HTML reporter, so don't worry too much. And then use. So what are we going to use in our test runner? The action timeout of 0, and then trace. We're going to have a trace running on the first retry of a failed test. So again, we'll show that later. And then the base URL, if you wanted to kind of uncomment that and put your base URL, we'll go through that later, but that's what the base URL is as well. Next thing is projects. I hope you're following along. Projects are basically what you're going to run your tests on. So a project of Chromium is going to use the desktop of Chrome, but you could also kind of have projects do different things. And we will go into projects later. So just know that this is where you would kind of come along and say, actually, you know, I don't want to run on Firefox for now or whatever. So you can totally like, you know, take away those browsers so you're only running a specific one, or I want to run my tests in mobile Safari. So then we would like uncomment that. Oh, I missed one of these. And then you're basically, when you're running your tests, you can run on mobile Safari as well. So that's how you would configure those. And you can also run your tests on branded browsers. So like actual Microsoft Edge and Google Chrome. We kind of tend to say, just kind of stick to the Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit. But if you had a special use case, you needed to do it on the branded browser, that's how you do that. The output directory is test results. If you wanted to change that, you can. That's for your screenshots, videos, and traces. And then a web server. If you want to set up a local web server, then you just have to uncomment this and then basically change your command to whatever start is and the port, etc. And then you can run your app locally if you don't have, you know, an actual URL. So that's basically the config file. And let's now go to the test. Does mobile Safari require Xcode? No, because it's just emulation. So it's emulating like what you would do when you open up Chrome and you kind of like bring it down to the mobile kind of, you know, size. You're emulating that device. So it's not actually running Xcode or running mobile Safari. But it's as good as, right? It's kind of as good as, but it's the best can be. So this is the example test file that you get. So I'll quickly walk through it. We're importing test and expect from Playwright test. And then we start writing our test. The test has title. I'm going to close this console here just to get more space. The test has a title. And we basically say, go to playwright.dev and then expect the title to contain a substring. So you expect the page. That's the page fixture that's included with Playwright. Okay, so that's the fixture that comes in. So we need to put that in. Then we have access to the page where we can then say go to, or using the expect library, say page, expect it to have a title of Playwright. This is like a meta title, right? So expecting the meta title to include Playwright. And the next test is the get started, a link where it says go to the same https playwright.dev and get by the role, again, using accessible roles here. So a get by role link with the name of get started, we click on it, and then we expect the page to have a URL of intro. So very simple tests. And I'm going to show you what it's like to run that test, right? So we're going to run the first test by literally just clicking the green triangle. This is why I like VS Code, because there's not a lot I have to do. And there, bang, that just worked, right? You see that? I'm going to run the other one. It's like so quick. And it's like, you know, run through it. You can see the line, bang, done. Easy, right? What do you think? Did you think that was cool? Did you see? Do you believe
That's
that
crazy
that
to
test
run them
works?
like in the browser.
Exactly. But do you believe it works? Did you see it work? Yeah, that was headless. Exactly. So this is the problem. When you're running headless, you just got to like trust the code. And then it's like, do you really trust the code? So I always trust my code. My code is always perfect. But you'll see down here, we have a little thing called show browser. Now, once you check this once, it will remember that it's checked. And then, you know, you're always going to get the browser. So now I'm going to run it and hopefully it's probably going to open up on the wrong screen, but let's have a look. There we go. Look, excellent. So it opened up here. Again, it was very quick. I'll run the next one and hover. There we go. See how quick that was, right? But at least you can see that that worked and that was actually running. So this is basically from VS Code. You have these kind of things. I can show you actually one of the other tests, which is going to take a little bit longer. So the demo test, which has, as you can see, a lot more code in it. We can just put that into this folder here. So I'm going to move that. Yes, I want to move that. And let's run this test describe block. So now I'm going to run this, and now we can see a little bit more of how fast Playwright was able to do everything that it wanted to do in that block. Let's do this one here. Like do, right? How fast is that? It's so cool. So when you're writing your tests, if you wanted to kind of like, debug, etc., it's really easy in VS Code. We can like set a breakpoint. Let's see, this one here. We can just click here, and then we can go along here and we can run in debug mode. So now we are on our browser and we're basically like, stopped at this point. So as you can see, it's highlighting, get by label, mark all as complete, right? That's where I am. And I can basically like, step through, go over each of these tests, just like you would normally in debugging. But the great thing here is, let me see if this still works. Mark all as complete, okay. If I type in this here, now it's like, this is not highlighting, right? Because this doesn't exist, right? So I need to go back and you can see it's highlighted. So you can kind of see that Playwright is coming along. And if I did like, say that I wanted to call it get by label mark all as, it's still saying that this is okay because mark all as is included in mark all as complete, right? So that label is still accepting it. So I just put this back here. And then basically we can go along to any of the lines and we can see that it's highlighted. So just by clicking on any of these lines, I'm getting by the test ID to do item. I can see that there's 3 test IDs here, 1, 2, and 3. And I can, see class of completed. So I can basically just go along through my tests. Just anytime I kind of click something, I can see let me see if this one shows there. That's the same label. So we want to get something else. Let me see, toggle all to be checked. So this one should highlight something. It's probably just highlighting it, it's hidden there. But as we go along, we can basically just kind of live change things. And I don't know if I'll change something here, I'll probably break it. What needs to be done? Again, we could delete that. We can, if I highlight this as the placeholder, and if I change this to be what needs to be, it's still okay. But if I did what needs to be help, that's not going to find anything, right? So that's how you can kind of live help go along with your locators. Now, say if I did have this problem here, right, that this is not being found. And if I run this test is going to fail as well. Does it support data test ID? Yeah, so basically you write your own, there's a Playwright test ID and you can modify it to be something else. So this is using the data test ID, but you can put in data my beautiful test ID and configure that if you particularly wanted to. So what were we doing? We're going to change this. This is failing. And we can actually use things like pick locator, right? So I can come along here and I go, I want this. And I click on this and now it's come up here in the box. This is what I need, get by placeholder, what needs to be done. And then I can come along and paste that in here. So at all times, I can kind of easily just, check what's going on. And easily, I'll just show that again, click on pick locator, buy some cheese. And then it's up here in the box and I can literally just enter to confirm. And now it's in my clipboard and I could paste that in there, right? So again, I'm just going to continue running that test and it's finished doing everything it needs to do and the test has passed, etc. So that's how to kind of debug live in VS Code. Excellent, I'm just checking the chat. That was cool. Test never works first time. It must be a bug. My tests always work first time. Okay, excellent. So that's pretty much the simplicity of how easy it is to work with Playwright. Something we can do here in the console. Let me just close this. Open a new terminal window. Now, if we were to run this with the console, we need to run this with the console. This is something we can't do just by clicking a button in VS Code. MVX Playwright test. it's going to run those tests for me. And you can see like there's quite a lot of tests there, 78, because we're running on the 3 browsers. So it's like, 3 times the amount of tests. It's using 5 workers, and you can see how fast this is kind of running. This is running in headless because we're using the terminal. We could totally add that to headed if we wanted to, but we just want to get a report here. That's what we want to do. So now that we have this option in VS Playwright show report, we can click this up here, and we don't want VS Code to tell us things. And lovely. And now it's serving the report at localhost 9323. Let me just copy that so it opens in the browser I want it to open. I'm going to close that, and we'll put this in here. And let me just, I think that's zoomed in okay. Yeah. So this is our Playwright report. I'm in dark mode. I hope that's okay. And basically it gives us a report of every single one of the tests that was run. So it's quite a lot of stuff to go through here. And we can filter by only showing Chromium, for example. We can show all tests. We can show any Firefox tests. We can show past tests, failed, flaky, skipped. And then we can go through each test very slowly in step by step. So we can actually literally just run through everything that went on in here. So the before hook, so the before each hook basically went into that and said, go to the to-do MVC page. And then it said, I want you to fill in the what needs to be done, press the enter, expect it to have the text, and continuing on. And you can kind of go through each of these, right? Now, I spoke to you earlier about traces, so I'm going to show you, can you sort by duration? That's a great question. I don't think you can. No, it's not clickable. No, so only by the label, but you can search. I don't know if you could search by 2 point. No, you can't search by duration. 997, nah. So no, you can't search by that, but you could put in a kind of like something like fast and search by fast or slow tests. If you wanted to search by slow tests, you could totally do that. So one thing I want to do is, that report is good, but I want to see like a trace of everything that's going on. So I can do that. If you remember, I showed you in the config that on CI, right, the traces are going to run on first retry. Okay, but I want to run them locally because I'm not ready to put it on CI yet. So I can do that by basically running the test again, npx playwright test, and this time I'll put trace -- trace on. Right now I'm going to run that test. It's going to do exactly the same. At 78 tests using 5 workers, running all those tests on Chromium, on WebKit, and on Firefox. And something to note here, I do not have Firefox on my machine. I don't have Firefox installed. Nothing against Firefox. I just use Edge more than Firefox and Chromium. But it's not on my machine, right? So that means you don't have to have it on your machine to actually use it. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of cool. So if you're on a Windows, you can, test against Safari, for example, which is really nice. So now I'm going to open my report again this time. And watch what we get now. This is cool. Again, normally just clicking works, but I have too many windows open, so I'm just going to do it this way. And open here, we've got a report, right? Now you see the only difference here, you've got this like little jail. I call it a jail. I think this icon is terrible. It looks like a jail. And this is the trace, right? But if we go into, we can click on this, or we can go in here, scroll down, and we can see it here, right? So the trace is available by clicking here or by clicking that one. And that didn't work for some reason, and it should have. So I don't know what happened there. Let's go back. It's probably because I've got 2 trace things open. There we go. So this is the trace of my test, right? I'm going to close this one so it doesn't get confused. There we go. So we've got a timeline here, right, where we can go across. We can see at what point the app loaded, what happened. And at each point, we can see an image snapshot. We bought some cheese, we fed the cat, and then do we do anything else? I think that's all this test did. We're just adding 2 to-do items in there. So that's just like the timeline. We scroll across. It's good to kind of see animations and see how things go. But this is so much nicer. This is the DOM snapshot, right? So we can click in here, and now we've got this snapshot of the page loading. What happened next? We started to buy some cheese, right? So that was written in here. And then you can see that that activated and added that menu in there. And we have like what's going in here, every single action. we can see the before the action, what happened, and after the action. So you can just kind of see how that was highlighted. If we go into this one, you can see before and after, right? How the feed the cat was in here at the top, and then it jumped down to the list of to-do items, and the action was writing in that feed the cat. Now we can also go along here and we can see the call. So we can see that what we did here was locator.press. I'm going to open this a bit more. We found the locator of the placeholder of what needs to be done. It's strict mode. Strict is by default in Playwright, which means you should only find one placeholder of what needs to be done. If there were two, then there would be an issue, right? And Playwright would just fail, right? Because it's strict by default. We press the enter key, and then the log is waiting for get by placeholder, what needs to be done. The input class, you can see everything that's happening. If there was anything going on the console, you would see that here. If there were any network requests, you'd see that here. And you also see the source code of the test. So as I click here, you should see that line jump to where it is in the page, right? So this one here, it went up to the before each. So I can kind of get an idea of where my code is and what's going wrong. And because this is like a local PWA that you could send to somebody, that means that, say you're sending it to another engineer to help you, they don't need to have the GitHub repo because they have the code here and they can kind of say, oh my God, you forgot to do this. And you're like, oh my God, I totally forgot that, right? So it's kind of really nice to have the source code there. So that's on that side. And then over this side, we have the metadata as well, which tells you that this test, this trace of this test is on Chromium. The user agent, the width, the height is mobile, it's false. So this is mobile Safari. The mobile here would be true. And then something that's really, really cool. So say, imagine we did have an error. Of course, my test passed, so we have no error, but we can inspect the DOM snapshot. And we can do it right here in this screenshot, or we can actually click this button, which just gives me more space, right? Now I have my app in this particular snapshot, and I can go along here and I can inspect it with Chrome DevTools. And I can say, I don't know, this here. Let me see. We can add the color red. I don't even know if this is going to work. There we go. We changed it to red. So we can basically kind of see, imagine there was something wrong with that one, or if we moved some classes, you know, we could see kind of in what state that would work. That was my toggle, right? So that's ugly. So I don't have the class of toggle. Maybe that would have been a bug that we could easily have found because the class is missing, and we can play around with that. So it's kind of really, really cool to like go in and, you know, debug the traces and actually play with this as an actual trace of your test rather than just a video, right? Or a screenshot. Cool. So that is basically all the cool things I want to show you. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat there and I will address them. And if not, we'll go on to actually creating our test, our first test. So I'm going to close the terminal.
I have one quick question for you.
Go for it.
The show browser on the
Yes.
menu there, does that just use your default browser, or is there a way to like customize which browser you want it to show?
Great question. So because we're using VS Code, it's going to take Chromium as default, particularly because in my config, Chromium is the first one here, right? So if I was to remove that, it would take Firefox first. But we can totally change that by clicking on the testing toolbar. And then up here, it's kind of hidden. It's like a little secret. And you click on this little arrow and you get Chromium Firefox WebKit. And you click on select default profile. And you open this up and then you say, I want to run on WebKit. And then, or all of them, right? If you wanted to, let's do WebKit and Firefox just for fun. So now if I go to, and let me just open the example test, a little bit smaller, just to be quicker. And we'll do this one here. So now if I open this, let's see what happens. There we go, lovely. And they popped up and you're able to see those two browsers. And you can see the difference in the browser, right? You can see this is Firefox, and you can see this is WebKit. So that's how that works. And then it will remember that configuration. So just remember that later. You might want to go, no, I don't. I want to just keep running my tests in Chromium and then later on test on all of them. So locally in VS Code, you need to manually do this. But if you're running NPX Playwright test, it will run on all browsers unless you specifically say -- project equals Firefox, right? And then you would run in the CLI.
Very cool.
But great question. Is there any way to set delay between commands when running the tests in the browser to see the sequence of actions commands performed? Okay, that's another great question. So let me show you that. Should we do it on, we'll just do it on this test because it's easier. So you can come in here and we can run npx playwright test -- debug. So this is the same as if we were debugging in VS Code, but now we're using, oh, it's going to run all the tests, but never mind. So we're going to go here and you could set a single test by putting in the name. I just forgot to put the name in. So this is my Playwright inspector. Let me bump that up a little bit. And basically from here, I can step through the test and go to each action, right? So that was like literally, there was nothing there to do. So that's why it just jumped. But you can kind of like go through, step through here, step through each action. And this will manually, you have to manually go through each one, unless you were to kind of go into your code and add like a pause in there, right? So unlike the VS Code debugger, where if you put the breakpoint, it will run your test until that point. So this can be a little bit slower to work with because you kind of have to manually like, you know, jump through. And then it's going to run all these. So I can kind of like go along and stop that at any point. So that's how you would do that. And if you only wanted one test, just put the name of the test. And you can also put the name of the line. So I could say example.spec.ts on line 3. Let me just quickly do that just to show you example.spec.ts, 2 little colon things. And let me put line 10. It's a nicer test. And now this should only run 3 tests because of 3 browsers, right? But this one test. And you can see it started here at this one here. And then I can just like go along here to the next one and etc. And now it's opening the browser Firefox, and I can go through each one here. So that's how you do that on CLI. Okay, cool. And I'll just stop that one. Excellent. Cool. That's all questions so far. Unless anyone has anything else, I will move on to the kind of cool stuff. We're going to write a test. Okay, you ready to write a test? Writing a test is so hard, right? You're like, where do you start? But what you normally do is copy paste, right? You kind of copy this, you create a new file and you paste it and you go, oh, I forgot to do the import. You like copy the import and then it's not, and you're like, oh my God, copy pasting is terrible. Don't copy paste. Click on the record new. Bang, look at that. Damn, what happened? You're like, whoa, what just happened here? I've got too many windows open from the previous one. So I probably should just, let me just close all these and do that again, right? Because this is left over from last time. And I'm going to close that and we'll just press that button again because it's so cool. I'm going to record new. Bam, look at that. Just recorded like the start of the test. You imported the test and expect from Playwright test. It started my test block. It called it test. We can, you know, change that and call it test example, etc. And it's recording, right? And you can see it's down here. It's saying recording. So what do we want to do? We want to record a test. And let me see, where will we go? I'm going to grab a URL just for fun. Let's record this one here. So we're going to go to Wikipedia. Bam. And we can, let's go and record the login, right? So we're going to go login. Excellent. And we've got, now you can only see one thing going on because I've got this screen here, but you can see that this is totally gone in here. Now it's messed things up, right? This is really important because I put the cursor right here on the test block. So this is an issue. So be careful of that. So we're going to stop that. We'll do that again. Don't save. It's fine. So we'll start again, right? And this one will be better because I didn't mess up the test name. And now we go along here. You can see it's in the right place. And we're going to click on login. And you can see that it got by page.getByRole links. I found the link called login and it clicked on it. So what else can we do? We can type in our username. So this is a great question now, but I remember my username. Let's have a look. I created one earlier. So I'm just going to go along here. And let me see if I can remember. Testing login. It's a great username. Don't tell Wikipedia I'm doing this. And I think I remember this. And you could totally create an account on here. You don't need to put your email address or anything in there, which is really nice. So it's a really cool experience to just like really quickly create an account and then actually put your own username and password in here. So now I'm going to press in login. This is going to log in. Yay, I'm logged in. Look at that. Cool. And then I'm just going to click on testing login because that's my username to make sure I'm logged in. Or I can click on one of these that it has like, the testing tools, for example, any of these, right? I can, click on here. I can keep clicking away and it's going to keep generating. So as I go along here, now obviously, you're going to see my password and you're like, oh my God, Debbie, you stick your password. Don't worry, I'm going to change my password later, right? This is local. It's all right. There's nothing in there. So basically you can see everything that's generated here, right? And I can kind of cancel my test now and I can stop that. So I'm in test3.spec. I've got this test created and there was like, not a lot of work done there, right? Really easy. I'm not going to say that comment out there, but I love that comment, Dustin. That's great. So basically here, what I can do is tidy this up because you can see a couple of things where I click twice for whatever reason, and Playwright kind of really like every time you click and do something. So yeah, that my password is cool, isn't it? I'm going to change it. I'm telling you, I'm going to change it. So basically, we don't need this capsule on page. That's fine. We can fill with testing. No, we filled with testing login. So I'll just remove that. And we don't need to click on the username. Well, maybe we do. Maybe we do. Press enter, fill. I think we don't need to. So let's just remove that. We'll find out in a second when we run it. And then we clicked on login and we expect. So this is like the page. We clicked on the personal tools. So we can just like go to that. And if we don't get there, we're not logged in, right? So I've cleaned this up. Let's see if this works now. Didn't. Click on the button. Logged in. Yes. Look at that. I rock. Okay. So that's how easy it is to write a test with Playwright. And that was a pretty kind of like useful test, right? So this is really cool. Any questions on writing a test? If you don't use VS Code, you can totally just come in here and write npx playwright Codegen. And this will give you the same kind of experience because it's going to open that Playwright inspector and you can kind of like, do all that kind of clicking along and it will record it for you, etc. But you're going to have to like save it yourself, right? So you're going to have to actually copy and then put it into your editor of choice. Okay, so just it's not as nice as VS Code because VS Code puts it right in the editor. Okay, yes, go for it.
So whenever I've used like recorders in the past on, bigger sites or production sites, I mean, you just showed it on a big production site, but like you always end up and it's like, the div link div type thing where like it's trying to, how are you combating that? Is it just looking for test IDs or IDs first? How does it stop it from being filled with a bunch of like cruft as you're doing things on the site?
That is a great question. So before, if you use Playwright before October, it would have kind of found a little, maybe it wouldn't have been as good as what you're seeing now. But we worked with Kent C. Dodds. If you know Kent C. Dodds, he created testing library. And if anyone have used testing library, you kind of find this code very similar. This get by role, get by placeholder. So with the inspiration of Kent C. Dodds testing library, we built into Playwright, into Codegen, these locators. So first the locators as part of the API, and then Codegen starts using these locators. So it looks for area roles first, as in like if it should a link as an area role link, right? If it can't find a particular accessible role, if your website's really, really bad, imagine you had a div and inside you just like, we're making it a button, right? So then without the role, then it would find, I don't know, div name button, right? Because it's not a button, you're just doing really bad HTML. So yeah, basically Codegen is programmed to be accessible first and to find the best roles. And it will use filtering as well and chaining to make sure that it's finding the right one. So if you had like a product card or a load of kind of like a load of buttons that are the same, but they're inside different product cards, it would filter it out by that specific product 1, product 2, etc., to get that unique basically locator. So you can be assured that your locators are unique and then less flaky tests in the future. So yeah, Playwright just does it all for you. And that's why we highly recommend that you use the generator, or if you really like writing your tests manually because you're just so much better than me and so much faster, that's totally cool. But click on the pick locator and actually go and just click and get the locator, rather than you having to figure out, hang on, what role is this? Is it this role? Is it that role? Like, let Playwright do the work for you. But yeah, and if you are finding that you've like really bad CSS and things like that, make your site more accessible, change your code. Because if Playwright can't find it, it means your user can't find it, which means your website needs a little bit of work. But great question. Cool. So what are we going to do next? Yeah, the recorder is so cool. I love it. I've like literally just, this is how I write all my tests. So we have an authentication, right? And we might want to continue writing more tests. So let's just write another test. Again, very simple. I'm going to use record new. But the thing is, I want it to be actually logged in, right? So I want a test that's from a logged in state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this test first. So I run this test just so I have the browser open so I can then continue my recording my test, right? So I'm logged in. So let's record a new test. And what will we do? And I opened up a new window. Damn, it's not going to do that for me. So I'm going to have to log in again. Oh, what we can do is I can do it another way, and I can move it. This is actually another way of doing it. Is I can go back to this test, right? And then I'll pull it out later into another test. I can click along here, and I can, let's play the test first. So this should stay open because I'm not going to open up a new browser when I press record new. So there it is, right? And now I'm going to record at cursor. So I'm going to like record from the specific point in this test. And later I'll take that out and I'll put it into that other test, right? So what do I want to do here? I don't know. Maybe I just want to test that there's notifications, right? That alert is there. And this is probably not even doing anything, is it? No, it's not recording. Look at that. Why are you not doing what I told you to do? Record at cursor. I think it's because of the logged in state. No, it's not going to do it. Right. Okay. I'm going to do this in a few minutes and I'll show you what I'm going to do first. So when you have problems like this is a really good idea of how to fix this. We're going to actually set up the tests to be run that rely on the authentication first. So let me kind of skip to the setup, and then we'll come back and show you how to add those tests onto it. So I'm going to go to my config, which is here. And what I'm going to do is, we can do it from here. So I basically want to create a project that depends on another project, right? I want to have a test and I want the setup to be run before each test, okay? So I can create another project in here. Give it a name, and we can call it setup. And we can basically use what's called filtering, right? To filter out a specific test. So I'm just going to go from the docs and take the actual what I want, which is test match, it's called. And you can see like TypeScript is, telling us what we need. So test match. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to match everything. And I'll set this up probably a little bit better in a second. Dot setup.ts. And I'll move this into an actual setup file, right? So I'm going to set this up first. So bear with me. And then I'll kind of move things around a little bit, okay? So we have a setup project that's going to set up, that's going to do our login, right? And then we want another project. Again, projects are what Playwright uses to run tests on. So this one we will call E2E, for example, E2E tests. And we can put we can say this is for the logged in test, right? So any test in this project is for any test that needs to be logged in, right? And then we could have another one that's not logged in. So this one, we want it to match And I didn't put a comma, that's why it couldn't find test match. And we want it to match basically, let's just do something like, I'm so bad at these, like copy, paste, stars. Let's put a loggedin.spec.ts. Before all of our logged in, we could say, I don't know, menu logged in or whatever, we could call it whatever we want. So it's going to match all of those. And then what we want to do is we want to use, and this is new since the last release, it's called dependencies. And I basically want to say this test depends on setup. So basically, you're going to have to run the setup before you run these tests. So that's cool. And then I'm going to set up, while I'm here, I'm going to do all this setup, and then bear with me and I'll try and explain things as we go along. What we also want to do is we want it to tell it to use, and this is where you would put like anything that you want it to use, like a base URL, if you want it to use staging or production, or maybe in this project, you want it to be retries to be more than another one because you had, I don't know, something else going on. But I want it to use storage state because I want to store the storage state of the authentication, and we can call it just something like storage state, right? So that's just the variable, which I'm going to have to create at the top of up here. So I can basically say, let me go into single caps, export. We want to export a const of storage state. Thank you. And then we can say path.join and the double underscore dear name, lovely. And we're going to basically put, we'll put it in the Playwright folder, and we'll call it .auth and user.json. Setup is misspelled below. Really? Did I spell it wrong? And obviously import path from path. Let me just check this out in a second. Import path from path. Lovely. Beautiful. That looks good. And let me see, what did I do? Oh, it is. Oh my God. You see, I used to be an English teacher, but don't tell anyone that. We have all these Spanish people going around spelling everything wrong. That's life. Okay, so thank you for that. So we've got our things set up, right? Any questions on this setup? I know it's like I'm kind of going into the future and showing you something that you haven't seen, but is everything clear on how dependencies work? That this project basically depends on this. So any test I run inside here that matches with a logged in spec, I could have 20 files with logged in, is going to run this setup first, and it's going to use the storage state. So it's not always going to have to actually log in, but it's going to remember that storage state and it's going to just like use it from there, which means just logging in once. It's like a before each. Yeah, it's kind of like a before each in a way. So yeah, it's just a nicer way because you're using it in a different test file, right? As opposed to in before each, it's in that one file. But now you actually have a separate file, and that's what I'm going to show you now. Okay, cool. So we've got the setup done, and let's now start playing. Let's write some real tests, right? So we have, what did I create here? This one here, this is a nice one that I can pull into its own file. Let me call this, what do we call it? Setup. Login.setup. Let's call it login.setup. Login.setup.ts. Okay, now this is my setup one. So let's, oops, that's perfect. That looks nice. And something I can do here just to kind of really ensure that this is setup is I can actually use import test as setup. Oops, setup. Can't spell setup. And then now it's like this is red, right? Because now we can use setup. So if anyone comes to this test file, they know, oh, this is a setup. And that's just, you know, you don't have to do that. Just a cool thing, just a cool trick. So that's perfect. And then what we want to do is import our storage state. So you're going to import storage state from, and we should go back to Playwright .config. I love the way like the little kind of image comes up there to kind of like really ensure that I'm choosing the right file. This is so beautiful. Okay, so we've imported our storage state, and then we want to basically, after we've kind of logged in and done our stuff, we want to use that, right? So we want to await page.context, context, and we want to say, oops, storage state. You can see it's kind of highlighting for me, and we want to put the path, and the path we want to use is storage state. Beautiful, right? So that's going to basically log in, and then it's going to save everything it needs into that storage state in the context. So then it can be easily reused across other tests. Cool. Now we've got the hardcore stuff done, right? So now we just need to do the rest. So I'm going to basically create a test. And I'm going to do, for example, let me take, well, we can, yeah, no, let me do this. I'm going to do this quickly just to kind of make it easier. So I'm going to just rename this test here. I'm going to call it E2E, E2E, logged in. We could call it menu logged in or whatever. .spec.ts, right? So because I'm using that logged in, it's going to find this test as the logged in. So I'm going to do something really, really quickly here. I'm just going to copy something over. We could totally just use the code generator, but I'm going to just do this. Here's what I made earlier, right? And let me just remove that because I put it in the wrong place. There we go. So this is just testing the menu of the logged in state, right? So now what I want to do is make sure this actually works. And I have no idea if it's going to work because we are live demo coding and this always goes wrong. So if I run this test, it should log in, right? Let's see what happens. So browser opens and it's like thinking, it's like, what am I doing? And it's struggling. So we can see something is going wrong, right? If Playwright is waiting and waiting and waiting, and as we can see, because we have a browser window open, nothing is logging in. So something is going wrong in here. We've got to figure out why. And it could be our test matches, it could be anything that's going wrong. But you can see like Playwright has an estimated amount of seconds where it's like, and then it's going to just crash out. And it's like, whoa, couldn't figure this out at all. Okay, so this is where we have to try and figure out what's going wrong. So let's take a look at what's happening. It couldn't, the browser has closed, right, at E2E logged in spec. So let's have a look. We have E2E logged in.spec.ts. So this should work fine. And then we have our, you can probably just remove all these other tests as well. Let me just do that quickly to make it easier to kind of see. I'm going to put the example into here, move that. And we move that one into there. And we can delete all these other ones to keep it cleaner. And delete. Okay, so we now have two tests, login.setup.ts. So let's take a look and see what's going on. So I know what's going on. So what we have is a test. This is what happens when you copy paste. We have a test that we're going straight into get by role, right? But the browser has been closed because the browser doesn't know where to go, right? Because before each test, even though we're logging in is basically just logging in, but the test actually needs to go to a specific place. It needs to know where to go. So what we can do is basically go to the same page, right? So we can take this. Now, this is where we can kind of refactor things a little bit more. So this is the page we want to go to, and I'll run the test first, and then I'll kind of refactor and show you how to make this a little bit cleaner. So we're going to go to that page. And now I run this test, this should work. So I run the test and okay, it took a second there for it to go over, but we went over and we're actually on this page here. So it found the browser page, that's good, but it's still having trouble with logging in, right? There's still something going wrong there. So let's stop that because it's taking too long, as you can see. So stop that. We can close all browsers as well. We wanted to kind of like, clean up our browsers. And let's run this test here to see and make sure that this is actually still logging in, even though, because we changed a couple of things. So we can see we're logged in. Okay, perfect. This is working. And now, why is this test failing? Let's have a look. We went to the main page and it didn't. So it actually just went to the main page and it did not go to the login first. If you saw it, like, because I closed the browser, you can see it did not log in. So it did not use the setup properly. And that's basically what's going on here, going wrong. So when we want to look at this, we need to go back to our Playwright config and check out what's going wrong. Now I'm going to remove these here because what's happening is pretty much if we, let me see if I can, Linda asked earlier about which browsers are running, right? And if I've gone to here, you can see that I'm running Chromium. So it's running Chromium, which means it's not running any of the tests, and it's confusing because of those projects, right? So I can basically take those away, right? By now it's going to basically have just these two projects. And I can, use desktop Chromium and kind of tidy that up later and put those in there if I wanted to, but just for this process. But if you're kind of like coding along and because you have like this config file with all these others set up, this can sometimes cause you an issue, right? So sometimes like go through your config, start kind of eliminating things out and get it back to a very basic kind of like setup. So now if I run this, I'm hoping VS Code remembers that I've just changed all this config. So now you can see it's starting to log in. It's going to the login and it's bang and it's got my test and there we go and it's done it, right? So cool, happy days. I love when things don't work because then you can kind of like really understand what's going wrong in your tests, because if it all just works, then it's like no fun, right? But you can see now that this works here. And what we can do now is tidy up this a little bit because we've got this like go-to URL and we're repeating this URL. And imagine having 100 tests and then, I don't know, we needed to like change this. So I mentioned earlier that we have, here it is, the base URL, right? In the use, this is always in the use part. So we can go and change this base URL. So let's go and take this one here. And let's put it in here, right? So now we have, this is the base URL. It probably doesn't need that main page, but it doesn't matter. It's totally fine. And then we can go along here and we can just use a slash like this. That makes it a lot tidier, and the same in the login, because now it has that base URL and it's going to constantly go to that. That just makes it a little bit easier. So I am still open here and I'm wondering if now I can record another test. Let me see. Let me just do it from here. And then I'll put it into its own block. So I'm just going to record at cursor. And maybe we want to log out. So you can come along here. And let's just log out. We want to make sure the user can log out. And then let's make sure that this logout exists, right? So this is my test here. And I can cancel that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into another separate test block. And let's just call it test logout. And then we can do all the usual stuff, put in our page fixture. And then we can move this test here. And we can put it in here. Tidy that up. And again, every test needs to go somewhere. It needs to start somewhere, otherwise it's going to cause us problems again. So we can do this, right? Now again, we can tie this up a little bit further, right? So we can actually use a before each, which is what someone kind of mentioned earlier, which is kind of like what dependencies are in a way. It's like a before each. So you can say test before, you can see it's here, like before all or before each. Let's do before each. And then async. Normally I have GitHub Copilot turned on and it does all this for me, but I have it turned off because otherwise it does too much work for me. Okay, and then we just want to take this await page, go to, put it in here, and now we don't have to repeat that. So if we had like 10 tests on this page, we have just one before each, page go to. And if we had two different ones, we could create a describe block, and we could have one describe block with this before each go to and another one with another one. So now our test should work. Let me save it. And I don't know, who knows? Let's see if we can log out. So I'm going to close my browser window. Just mainly, we don't have to do this, but I'm just doing it so that you can really kind of see that it's actually, you know, doing what it's need to do. So in order to log out, I need to log in. I need to be logged in. So let's see if it works. So open the window and it's, look, it's logging in. It's logged in. It's running the next test and it's logged out. And there we go, right? So that test is running on that setup and then it's running that other one. Now, you probably saw that it's, if I run these tests in VS Code, it's going to like run each test before each one. But if you were to run this in the console, you'll see that it actually only logs in once. And you'll kind of see if you had like, you know, a load of ones, you'll see that it's using that storage state. So some cool things that can be done with this, right? Is everything clear that what I've done so far? Does anyone have any questions on this? I can do something else as well that I can use. Let me see. That I can use env variables as well very easily, because obviously like storing passwords and things like that is, you know, not the right thing to do. So I can use let me just go into the setup. I can use something like process.env.username, right? I'm just going to put this in here and I'm just because I'm going to forget the username and password. Password, excellent. And then I can go and create an env file. Oops, caps locks. Okay, and then I can put username, password. I can go back to my example and I can copy that and I can put it in the env file. Is it 2 dots? I think it's 2 dots. Correct me if I'm wrong. And take out my beautiful password. And each way tests. Okay. Chat is quiet, so it looks like I did things right. So that's my env file, and obviously I need to go in here and add this here so it doesn't go into CI. And then if I'm using GitHub, I can just add a GitHub secret, a repository secret, and then I would put that in there. And then on CI, it's going to use that secret. And locally, I'm just using the env variables. So
Debbie,
just to go over that.
Isn't it variable equal, not variable colon?
Could be, totally could be.
I always forget.
I always forget too, so we'll find out.
Your editor looks happier right now, though.
That's why I said, is it colon? Is it equals? Lovely. So it doesn't work, then it's always just a matter of changing it. But yes, thank you. So yeah, process.env.username and .password. It's going to pick it up from that env file or from GitHub secrets on CI. So what do we need to do next? Is we need to install npm .env. I think it's just called .env. And that should just install that for us. And that should be in our package JSON.env. Beautiful. And now we should be able to just go into our Playwright config. The very, very top, it's already got this kind of here for us, right? That comes by default. So it's not just I had this prepared because I didn't have anything prepared, as you saw. So basically that's here. And there's a whole, you can read about that if you wanted to. So now it's requiring that .env. So now we're going to see if it works, right? We're going to test out if my env variables are right. So we can click on the setup test. Where's my setup test gone? I have too many things open now. There we go. And we'll just click on this test and see if it's now going to run and log in and come on, you can do it. Yes, yes. Thank you for fixing my env variables. So yes, this works. And again, on CI, just go and create those GitHub secrets or whatever CI you're using. So that's cool. Now what we can do is run this test and see a report. So yeah, I put everything else into, yeah, so we just got 2 tests, perfect. So npx playwright test, and I'm going to put trace on, right? Because I want to see a trace of my test because, you know, I want to see that this is working, or maybe it's not working and I want to, you know, kind of understand what's not working. So it's running these 3 tests using 2 workers, and you can see it's running you can see that went through kind of those tests. So let's have a look at the report. npx playwright show report is the command. And this happens because I have so many terminals open. So I'm gonna have to close all these. Right, let me do that again. I have a terrible habit of like having 50 terminals open. So this should work now. And it's going to run those tests. So you can see it's kind of going through the logged in one, and then it's like really quickly, right? And run through those. So npx playwright show report. And yes, it's working. And it opened up on my other screen. So I'm going to like just copy it over and put it on this one. And let me close this just to show you that it's the right one. Perfect. So here is my my login setup and my eatery logged in spec file, right? And as you can see, because I'm using project dependencies for my global setup, I have a HTML report of my test, of my login test, as well as my other tests. This is something you only get because of project dependencies. So if you're doing something like this, this is the way to do it. And that means I can click on here and see an actual full trace of my login test, where I can easily debug this, go through each action, see what's kind of going on before, after, etc. And again, pull it out, debug that if I wanted to, and kind of understand it. And then I could go back if I wanted to, and I can see the menu. Oh, let's look at the log out. And we can see that we clicked, you can see it there, the action. Before, after, you can see the pop-up button happened, and go through each thing. We can see our network, what's going on here. And we can see the source code, so we can kind of go back and forward and see at each moment in time what's happening, what's going on, pop it out, open Chrome DevTools, and kind of really inspect that and see, I don't know, change everything and do what we want to that, okay? So that's really, really cool, and that you just get traces by default. Given we're using .env, what happens when you have Playwright collocated with other project? Does it only look for the closest lex with .env? So you could put a different env name. You could put whatever. I just called it .env, but you could put a playwright.env or something like that, and then just make sure you add that name in there. So that's basically how to do authentication and how to kind of set that up. And again, you could create another file, another test file in here. Let's just do something, I don't know, really simple. I don't even know how much time we have. So let's just do something really simple. Open the test bar and let's just record a new test. And let's go to our Wikipedia page. Let me find the URL. It's in here. It's in our base URL. Lovely. Let's just find this. And we can create another test, and let's just look for Playwright. Obviously, it's not going to find Playwright. It's going to tell you what a playwright actually is, right? And it's going to record that test for us. If we go back to our test 1 spec, there we go. And that did not do it for some reason. I should have totally recorded that. Something up with my VS Code extension, but that's okay. Let's just record at cursor. We'll do that action again. Click on Playwright. And there we've got our test, and we can kind of like expect, we can add, because what Playwright doesn't do is it doesn't automatically do expects for you. So you've got to change that. I'm just going to change it to be visible, right? So that's how you do that. I normally click on everything and then I just like refactor. It makes it easier. We need a page go to in here. So because that didn't record for it, let's stop that recording. It's totally fine. And just put await page.goto. Oops, dun, dun, dun. I have my keyboard totally in the wrong place and it's confusing because I don't look at my keyboard. Okay, there we go. That should work. And now we run this test. And VS Code is massing up. Let me close this one here. And OneDrive is playing up. Lovely. No, we don't want notifications. Okay. So what's wrong with this test? I did something wrong. Test.1. Let me close it and open it again. No, I didn't pick it up. So for some reason, this test is not being picked up. Let me rename it to something more fun. Let's call it e2e.spec. I just want to basically show you that we can create a test. And then what we can do is in our Playwright config, we can create another project that does not depend on this. So then we can run this test. We can just call it e2e. And this is the one that's not logged in. And we could do something like, something like test, let me see if I remember the name, test ignore. That's the one I want. There we go, test ignore. And we can ignore anything that is basically logged in. So I'm gonna copy this. We want to log it. We want to ignore anything with this or anything with this. And now it's that one is just going to run those tests. So say you had a load of tests that had logged in, then basically they would always use the dependency of setup and the other one would not. And that's how you kind of like separate them out, etc., with filtering for those. Any questions on that? You missed the reason why we moved Chromium, Firefox. Yeah, sorry, that was just me playing around in the config. I would basically what I would do is, you know, use, actually we have a use. So I want to take this devices. I want to use Chromium, for example. So I put it into here, right? And I'd build that test up and we could do, we could kind of do this here. Right, we could say e2s logged in Chromium and then like kind of repeat that process for each of those browsers and have those dependencies, et cetera, depending on how you want to set it up. So I just removed them quickly just to kind of show you how to get that working. But basically that's how you would do that. Just reading the chat, this is clear. Okay, any other questions that you have on this? If this all makes sense. I don't know what this is. Oh, look at the green button there. So for some reason, VS Code just took a little while for it to click. So I'm going to show you. Let me just make sure. I'm going to close the browser just so you can kind of see that this test should not log in, right? It should not log in. It should just go to the URL. And let me have a look. It should open it and it should click Playwright. And it should find Playwright. Okay, so basically you can see that that test did not go through the login process. You can see I still have this login here and basically did everything. You can see like this is kind of saying, whoa, there's too many of these going on. And it's like exact truth. This is like, no, there's so many more Playwrights on this page, right? So you'd have to kind of like, you know, narrow that down and kind of fix that into a better selector by looking for the heading or looking for whatever. But basically, the idea here is just to show you that from the config, this is how this works. And again, you can put these devices here, right? So you can put to make sure everything is using Chrome. If you were just wanting to use Chrome and everything, that's how you would do that. And again, creating ones for each, you can create as many projects as you want. So you can set this up in whatever way. And then you can also, using the terminal, you could just do project setup. Let me show you that actually is easier. So we can run our tests again with the CLI, npx playwright test, -- project. And then we're just going to run the setup project. And that will basically just run one test using one worker, setup login.setup.ts, and it will run that test, bang. And if you wanted to see that that test really passed, you can just open up the report. You might have another terminal open. So this might crash, let you see. Come on, lovely. And then you can basically see that report. So that's how you kind of work if you're not working with the VS Code extension. And there's your beautiful login test with full access. We didn't put trace on here, so that's why there's no trace of this. So if you did want to use a trace, you would just run that command with -- trace on. Is there a config to make tests without expect fail? Without expect fail. I don't think there is. There is docs on the expect that you could look into, but I don't think you can make the test fail if there is no expect, because you saw in my test, which I was really bad, that I just put a this one has an expect, but some of them don't, right? So yeah, these tests will pass even though there's no expect in here. This should really be expect page to have URL. So I should have modified this to make it better. But yeah, I don't know if you can do that in the config. I'd have to check that out. But good question. So basically, I don't have much else to show you unless you have any other questions. What I can do is give you this repo if you're following along. Let me just see if I can find the link. And I can put this in the chat, but I'll put along so anyone's watching later as well, that you can go to this repo and this shows you the exact thing that we created today, more or less. And you can kind of copy it along and go through it. Again, just a very, very basic with the tests that kind of we created today. So that's something in case you wanted to take home and play around with yourself. The end file is not in there. So you're either going to have to remember my password or you're going to have to create your own username. So just make sure you do that. And yeah, clarification on the storage. And also, do you have a way to wait for network requests? So clarification on the storage, what it's doing is, and I didn't really show you let me see if there's a better way to show it. We have, we can run our tests. I know how I can show it to you. Yes. Okay, let's do it from this way here. So we have our spec file here, has one test, and this is the login setup, and this is one. This is the one, right? So this is two tests, right? So I can run this one here, which is going to run the two tests, right? So clicking here, let me see if this works. I always just let's just close all browsers so we don't have any problems. And let's gonna run this and then really fast scroll across. Okay, what's going to happen? I'm going to log in. Cool. And now I'm going to do that one test. I check the menu and then I'm going to do that other test, right? But you did not see me log in twice. Okay, I will do that again just so to be very, very clear, because I know it's kind of really, really hard, but there's two tests are being run and I am not logging in twice. The window is not opening up twice. So again, I'll just quickly open that up again so you can see I'm going through the setup test. It's logging in, right? And it's sticking that into storage. It's opening up a browser window. It's going to do that kind of menu thing. And then it's opening up another browser window and it's going to log out, right? But I did not log in twice, and that's how that's working. So it's kind of like saving that into storage and using it from the storage state. So context includes all cookies and session storage. Yes, exactly. It is magic. It is magic. I love magic. Yeah, that's how that works. And do you have a way to wait for network requests? So yes, basically I refer to docs for all those kind of things. So like test timeouts and all those kind of things, navigation, all that kind of stuff is in there. So you want to wait for things like that. And there's a page on network as well. So you can do all stuff in here as well. So just check those out. Cool, good questions. Await 45. Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, normally you don't need to mess much with await. I would fix your code if you kind of putting in waits all the time. Playwright will wait by default. So like as it's kind of waiting for the things to be ready, it's going to do all that for you. So you don't really need to play around with it much unless your code is bad. But remember, Playwright's like a really, really fast user. So if you're ever kind of trying to understand how Playwright works and you're not figuring it out from the trace viewer, put your like code into 3G and kind of like see what a user on 3G network is. And then you're kind of like really going to understand, because you have to slow down your website to get to the level of speed that Playwright is on. Once you do that, you'll be able to like go, oh my God, the menu doesn't click. It doesn't work for 5 seconds. No wonder the test is failing. The user is frustrated, right? We're all living in a 5G world these days. So we don't care about the people on 3G, but some people are on 3G. So just keep those in mind. Excellent. Any other questions?
I'm going to ask because of the wait question. I know Playwright has the recording feature. I used it for something I built to do kind of a code snippet playthrough recorder thing that I built. But I needed a way for there to be a natural delay between frames. Is there a way to configure Playwright to do that? Or is that actually a valid use case for doing a wait?
What do you want to wait for? Say that again, please.
Yeah, so it's like, imagine like a slideshow presentation in the web, and you want to be able to view each slide and capture that recording, post it somewhere else. I put waits in order to artificially slow it down. Is there a way to do that? Because it's a single page app. It's all loaded on initial. The 3G slowdown's not going to help. Is that actually the proper use case for a wait in this situation? Or is there something I could have been doing that I should have thought about doing?
Don't try and justify yourself, Dustin. I bet there is a slowed down recording by speed or pace, like
that's what I'm asking.
Record or something.
I want that feature.
Slow down the recorder. Or you want to slow down the test? What do you want to slow down?
Slow down the recorder would be fine.
Well, the recorder is just recording at your pace.
Yeah, I think then I guess the test is what I need to slow down.
You want to slow down the test?
I can also send this to you in DMs.
Yeah. But you can add slow in there.
Okay.
You can.
Yeah, something that I've done is run the tests automatically on a slow pace to send those as a demo to product. Because like, I'm not going to run through it every time there's a change, but I want to send those recordings to product. So you basically tell it to record slow. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I want.
Cool. Problem solved.
I couldn't find it when I was looking, but I also was doing this 6 months ago, so maybe it's new.
I don't think so, but maybe, who knows? Why are n file vars not sorted alphabetically? It breaks perfection. No idea. I just quickly did it. You can do it so much nicer than me. I leave that into your perfect hands. Not a Playwright issue. Excellent. Any other questions? Anything else you want to know about? The docs are really great. I highly encourage you to read them. And I created a really good best practices guide, which I think is really good because I wrote it. But no, seriously, it just goes through a little bit of testing philosophy, things that maybe you don't know, and how to kind of, improve and add some best practices specific to Playwright as well. So if you're kind of like unsure where to start and which is the best way to do things, then this might help you out a little bit. So I encourage you to read it or at least skim through it and just, tell me it was amazing. Totally fine.
No, this is amazing. And if y'all don't know Debbie is one of the friendliest people on the internet. And she has been
I am in the real world as well, Tracy. It's not just the internet.
So if you're ever in Mallorca, everybody should just take a trip to Mallorca to go visit Debbie.
Yes, come running or cycling, and we can run a cycle around the island.
Yes. I still remember in Mallorca, just picking figs off the tree. I was just like, so amazing you can do that. It's just, now I'm hungry.
Lemons, oranges everywhere.
Oh, I love it. Debbie, what is your Twitter handle?
Twitter handle is Debs_O'Brien.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. And then
if that's really hard to remember, just think Debbie.codes, as in code. I code Debbie with 2 B's. Debbie.codes. You can find all my links in there, and you can find the GitHub repo link. You can find my Twitter. And I highly encourage you to join the Playwright Discord as well, because you can ask any questions that you were too afraid to ask today, or you missed, or you thought later, or, you know, it's too late. You're like, oh my God, just like going to Discord, and you can post that question in public as well. And a lot of people can help you out, because I don't know the answer to everything. But you can totally like ask me as well, especially if it's to do with this demo. I do know the answers to these ones.